Imagine the year is 1823. There's no internet, there's no fun, you're kind of out in the woods trying to get some logs or whatever to sell it, to buy some, whatever they're eating in 1823. When all of a sudden, you get attacked by a grizzly bear. The bear attacks you, messes you up pretty bad, and you're laying there, can't move, can't really respond because you just got attacked by a bear, and the guys that are supposed to be in charge of taking care of you just leave you behind. What do you think would happen? I'm gonna be honest, if I was in that situation, I wouldn't make it. I think I'd be like, well, I got attacked by a bear. It's my time. But the person we're talking about today is so tough, so insanely awesome that they just survived it. So we're gonna talk about it. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Scrub here, back again with another video, and I felt like making another survival video today because I have a lot of fun with them, and we've got to talk about Hugh Glass, which some of you have probably heard of if you've ever seen the movie The Revenant. Yeah, this is the guy that actually did that. You know, he's not Leonardo DiCaprio trying to get an Oscar. No, this guy just got attacked by a bear in 1823 and managed to survive. Absolutely insane story of survival I wanted to share with you guys. So yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy, and press the like button if you're hyped. If not, that's okay. You should still press it though. Alright, so Mr. Hugh Glass is a little bit of a mystery in terms of his early life. That's probably because he was born in 1783, they think. No one really knows for sure, but records weren't exactly kept about every single person way back in the day. And so little is known about him that nobody's even sure where he was born. They just know around a year he was born based on ages he would say later. But from very early on, he was out in the wilderness doing his best to thrive off the environment. He would trap for fur, he would go on expeditions, and most people think, once again, they don't know, that he was living in Mississippi or by the Missouri River, and he was just doing his thing, going out, getting some fur off some animals, going to the market and selling it. Every now and then maybe being involved in some lumber or whatever is going on, but he was a very outdoorsman type of guy. Spent a lot of time out in nature and thrived in it. It wasn't something he was afraid of. Personally, if you told me that I had to go out into the woods and live for a week, I wouldn't know what to do. But this guy, you tell him to go live in the woods for a week and he'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I just do that for fun multiple times a month, dude. I just live in the woods. You know what I call living a week in the woods? Living. And obviously someone of that stature would be very useful because at this time they're doing all these expeditions, they're sending people out to explore and do all these things. So this general comes to him one day and he's like, hey, listen, Hugh, you're an absolute G out in the woods. You do everything better than anyone I've ever seen. You're a legend. I've never seen someone chop down a tree with their teeth before, but you managed to do it. I made that up. I don't think that part is true, but the general was very impressed by his outdoorsmanship. And so he says, join this expedition, dude. You guys are going to go on this awesome expedition to the upper Missouri River area, and it's going to be great. You guys are going to explore some stuff, chart it for me. We're all going to just be so famous for being explorers. And you're exploring anyway, so you might as well get paid by the government to go explore, maybe help out the state you're from, everyone wins. So Hugh gets convinced by this general, and he joins this expedition, and they're on this expedition, and it's way back in the day, so they didn't bring the supplies with them that they really needed to sustain themselves long term, and it's all very experienced hunters and outdoorsmen, so every now and then they would have to stop on the river and then go off the river and try to find stuff to eat. Which is crazy to me. I think camping already is, I love camping, all right? I'm not trying to say that, I hate the woods altogether. But you gotta bring all your supplies and stuff. Could you imagine if us as humans were still good enough at survival that we could just go on a camping trip, take our tents out in the woods, and be like, all right, I'm gonna go catch a squirrel with my bare hands now without getting rabies? I'm just saying, people way back in the day, yeah, because of the lack of internet and modern amenities, were just better at survival, because everyday life was survival. This guy was waking up since he was a child all right, I gotta go catch dinner. You probably get pretty good at catching dinner if you have to catch it every night. Either way, they're on one of these hunting trips one time, and he's out off the river kind of doing his thing, and out of nowhere, this grizzly bear comes up and starts attacking him. And if it was a male grizzly bear, then we're thinking about a 600-pound bear. Females can be 440. This is a giant bear that runs up and just starts smacking him with the paw, attacking him, and no one really knows exactly what set headed off. Chances are he probably got too close to the cubs, or like because they were hunting, it thought it was hunting him, or you know what I'm saying, like the bear felt threatened. Not that it knew it was being hunted, but maybe it was like, okay, this is not going to end well. Either way, it just absolutely attacks Hugh and leaves him shredded. The dude is really messed up, like punctured lungs, holes in his body, broken bones. It's not looking good, and the injuries are so severe that the guy is just not really responsive to anything. Like, you can tell that he's still alive, obviously, he's breathing, but it's not looking very good. And so his companions that are on a journey in the wilderness that's like uncharted, there's really no way to get to quick medical care, kind of say, all right, well, 2 of us will stay here for a bit with him and see if he recovers, and the rest are just gonna move on. So the rest of the expedition moved on, and the 2 people that were left behind with him eventually are like, yeah, this guy's just gonna die, and we don't want to get too far separated from the group. We have to sustain ourselves, and they decide that they're just gonna like bury him. So they dig a very shallow grave. They're not very respectful about it. They kind of do him dirty, and they just put him in there. And to be clear, I'm not saying they were doing him dirty by making the choice to leave him behind. Like, it is 1823 in the middle of the wilderness. Sometimes if someone gets attacked by a bear, you're like, look, the only way the group's gonna survive is if we keep moving. There was also Native American attacks at the time, because imagine all these dudes with guns show up on your turf. Like, you're gonna be like, hey man, get out of here. So the longer they stay there, there's more of a chance that they run into people that don't want them to be there. So they thought that leaving him would be the best bet. But the shallow grave, like, dude, this guy got attacked by a bear on your expedition. The least you could do is dig him a real grave, you know? And I'm not sure if they thought he was dead or not. If they knew he was alive, then it's extra messed up. But if they thought he was dead with all these horrible injuries and him being unresponsive, then I don't know what you do. You don't stay there forever. So they kind of like put him in this grave and cover him a little bit, and they move on, trying to catch back up with the rest of the group. Well, Hugh Glass ends up waking up, and he finds himself in this shallow grave with like all these injuries on his body, broken bones, the whole 9 yards, and it's 1823. So chances are, after being buried, these injuries are going to get infected. Like, it's not going to be a very good time. And even if he manages to get back to civilization, which he's like 200 miles away from, it's not like medical care was known for being super advanced and fantastic in the 1800s. Like, nobody wants to go back there and get medical treatment from way, way, way back in the day. And so he realizes, crap, the crew left me behind. The last thing he remembers is getting attacked by the bear. And he wants to survive, obviously. Like, that's the natural human desire. But he combines that with a pure fuel for revenge. Like, he is pissed off. He can't believe that they left him for dead. Like, he's alive, you know. They were always supposed to support each other on this expedition, and they just put him in a shallow grave and called it a day. So he immediately starts thinking, like, how am I going to survive? And so he pulls himself out of this shallow grave and is sitting there thinking about, like, man, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I have a general idea of which direction to go, but my injuries are brutal. Like, I have to crawl, basically. But he's so fueled by the desire for revenge, to get revenge on the people who left him for dead and put him in this situation in the first place, that he just decides he's going to survive. And so he starts crawling and like stumbling out of this forest, eating berries and roots that he's finding along the way. And he still has all these severe injuries, so he's making his way through this insanely rough terrain, eating berries, eating roots, and he realizes, all right, like, I'm gonna need some tools. I'm gonna need to get some stuff to defend myself, because I already got attacked by a bear once. I'm in a way worse state now. I think animals are gonna know that I'm wounded, so I need some weapons. So he starts managing to create these weapons from stuff he's finding in the woods too, just on the off chance that he gets attacked. And it's probably pretty smart that he ended up making these weapons in the first place, because the terrible luck means that he gets attacked multiple times while on this insane journey that he's crawling through the woods in this rough terrain on. He has to fight off wolves, because it's not already bad enough you get attacked by a giant bear. No, a pack of wolves have to show up and be like, hey man, can we eat you? No, let me use my weapon I made in the woods while I was crawling on the floor eating roots to fight you off. But he does it, dude. Like, imagine being such an absolute specimen that you can fight off wolves with just a sharpened stick that you have when you already have insane injuries, dude. He maxed out all of his attributes. He had like beaten the campaign. He was playing in free mode. And so he survives that, dude. He survives encounters with mountain lions. He survives encounters with all of these animals the entire time, insanely wounded and like just doing his best to survive. And finally ends up crawling over 2 200 miles, dude. 200 miles while being attacked before he gets to this fort, and he crawls up and they're just looking at him. Can't believe that this guy just crawled up in this condition. 1800s. It's not like there's easy ways for places to communicate with each other, really, in the ways we have it now. Like, they can't just call each other up. So imagine you're at this fort and all of a sudden this guy, literally half dead, ends up like crawling out of the woods wearing the skins of animals that he's defeated with like one arm tied behind his back with a stick. And he's just like, hey man, can I get some help? You'd probably think there was a zombie apocalypse or something going down. I mean, I don't know, but like, my goodness, you're just supposed to stand watch at the fort. Hey man, just guard the fort. Oh, the one time James guards the fort, here comes the half dead guy with a sharpened stick and a dead wolf. Oh, and one more thing that he like managed to survive while he was out there before we get back to the fort part. Sorry. He was getting across rivers too. So like, with all these bear injuries, managing to swim across rivers, I think the human will to survive is just absolutely insane. Like, if you're in these situations, you can survive anything because your body will just not let you give up in certain situations. And obviously, I'm not saying that people that can't survive these situations like gave up. The elements are the elements. The human body can only take so much. But the idea that you like theoretically could be attacked by a bear and crawl 200 miles out because you know a human has done that before is insane. It makes me feel like a baby, all the things I complain about, like, oh man, my printer's out of ink. It's like, well, at least I didn't have to crawl 200 miles after being attacked by a grizzly bear to get medical attention that was in 1800s standards. Anyways, now that he's at the fort, they give him medical attention, but 1823, so it's not like they have a doctor on staff that can like reset broken bones and do everything to clean out these wounds properly. They do their best, but it's very likely that he only received like basic medical attention, which is nuts after going through what you've gone through. And so obviously, because the medical attention isn't like the standards that we have now, his injuries leave him with like a lot of scars and some issues with like mobility and the ability to do things the way he used to. But he did just crawl 200 miles after being attacked by a grizzly bear, so it's possible that your body is kind of like, hey man, I need some time to recuperate and I'm not sure if I can do everything the same anymore, because you just survived something insane. And chances are that the people at the fort were just super impressed by his story. It's not like they had the ability to hop on YouTube and listen to everyone's insane stories of survival in the span of like a 3-day period. No, that wasn't the case, and they lived in the area, so imagine someone manages to survive this insane ordeal, shows up, you give them medical attention. Of course you're going to want to help him. Like, that's an inspiring story regardless. If I saw Hugh on the street today, even with all this YouTube stuff, I'd be like, man, you survived some crazy stuff. That's impressive. I would definitely help a guy if he crawled out of the woods and was like, I got attacked by a bear and I crawled 200 miles. I think that's a normal human thing. But chances are he was able to stay at the fort for quite a long time because they were just so blown away by the story of survival. Like, this is crazy at the time. People didn't hear things like this, really. As for what happened after his recovery, because it was such a long time ago and he wasn't the type of guy to like want to go to the press and say everything going on, celebrity didn't really exist like that. Or if it did, it wasn't going to be like in Hugh Glass. So he just kind of went back to living his life. It's unsure if he stayed at the fort for a long time, took a long time to recover, or if he went out and went back to trapping, like, oh well, I'm just gonna go do what I kept doing for a living out in the woods. There's also some stories that he like literally went out to seek revenge on all the men. I think that maybe fueled him at first, for sure. All your friends abandoned you for dead. But I think really, like, if you were sitting there after surviving all that, I don't know if you'd have the energy to go hunt down like 32 men and punish them all. Maybe he did. He's clearly got some tenacity. He crawled 200 miles in the woods after being attacked. But I don't know. For his sake, I hope he didn't spend the rest of his time after this like trying to angrily hunt down a lot of people like a Red Dead Redemption DLC content pack. I know some people in the comments are probably like, no, that's way cooler. No, I hope he just went and did whatever he wanted. I hope he just vibed, to be honest with you. I hope he was out in the woods and his job was very easy. I hope he didn't really have to do a lot of hard stuff after that. The only thing that is known is just like the general area he spent it in, which is the western frontier at the time, which is like that Missouri River area. But yeah, overall, dude survived a literal grizzly bear attack in 1823 and crawled 200 miles out. I have another insane survival story for you guys, but if you enjoyed this one about Hugh Glass, be sure to press the like button. All right, so this next guy managed to survive 133 days adrift in the middle of the ocean during World War II. This is Poon Lim, and he is an absolute legend. He was a Chinese sailor that found himself on a British ship during World War II. And it wasn't even like he found himself on a British warship during World War II. He was on one of the merchant liners that was responsible for transporting goods back and forth. But in World War II, the Germans decided that they were going to start sabotaging the supply lines to try to like ruin Britain's chance of being able to keep resisting, and they'd finally have to surrender. So German U-boats, which is the term for submarine back in the day, decides, all right, we're going to start sinking these merchant ships, which is really messed up because it's not like the people on board are combatants. Most of the time, they're civilians or sailors that have nothing to do with what's going on. Like, this was a Chinese sailor on a British merchant ship. He had nothing to do with it, but the Germans didn't really care. They were just trying to sabotage the supply lines. So, unfortunately, on this ship, a German U-boat decides to send a torpedo its way, and the ship sinks. And it sinks really quickly, it sinks really violently, and Poon Lim is the only survivor after the boat sinks. He's the only person left, and he's kind of looking around this wreckage, and he decides that, like, he's got to survive somehow. He's got to tell the story of what happened, so he starts swimming around the wreckage and makes himself a makeshift raft. There was no raft left after the wreckage, so he summons the energy somehow to, like, put this thing together that he's going to survive the next 133 days on. So it's just parts of the wreckage, it's things that would float, and he's out there drifting, and in the wreckage, he manages to find a compass, so he has, like, a little bit of an idea of where he's going, but he doesn't have a way to really control this raft, and he starts making plans on how he's going to survive. And he knows that, like, number one, he's going to need something to protect him from the elements, he's going to need a source of food, and he's going to need water. If he doesn't have those three things, it's over. There's no reason to keep trying. So he sets about setting up a way to, like, collect rainwater, which is big brain. It's one of the only ways to really efficiently get fresh water at sea, unless you can set up a solar still, which, you know, would take a little bit of a genius. Oh wait, good thing Poon Lim was a little bit of a genius. He manages to set up a solar still as well, so he has two sources for being able to collect fresh water. So that's taken care of, and he starts looking around the boat, and he just has bits and bobs from the wreckage, and he starts looking around for something he can fish with, because that's probably the easiest way for him to get food. Other than, like, when birds would land on his raft, he would catch them as well, which has got to be so unlucky. The seagulls flying up above him, man, it's the only thing I can land on for like thousands of miles. They go in to land on it, just whoop, not anymore, pal. I don't blame Poon Lim at all, though. I would do the exact same thing. Like, if I hadn't eaten in 3 days and a seagull landed on my raft, I would look at it like KFC. I'm not gonna lie. So good for him for getting multiple streams of water, not only water, but multiple streams of food as well. But he's looking through all these things, and he ends up finding like some nails that he can twist into hooks, some other metal bits, and so now he's got himself a fishing setup, which is fantastic. Like, literally makes hooks out of pieces of the wreckage of the ship that got torpedoed. And he even found a way on this makeshift raft to make a fire, because there were certain times when it would get incredibly cold. This all went down in the Atlantic Ocean, which I guess gets very, very frigid at night. Most oceans probably do. I'm not an expert, I don't know, but he did find a way to make a fire to keep himself relatively warm. And of course, he did string together a shelter as well, just to kind of keep him out of the elements. But no matter how great your makeshift raft is, and no matter how great your stream of fish and birds are, and no matter how great your solar still is, 133 days drifting across the ocean is not great for your body. And he ended up getting very severe, not only dehydration, but insanely bad sunburns. I mean, think about it, how intense the sun is at the beach. Now imagine the open ocean where everything's just reflecting it right back at you. And on top of it, the only real shelter you have is, like, it blocks you from the sun, sure, but you can't stay in there all day. You have to catch fish, you have to get water, like, you have to survive. So he starts getting insanely severe sunburns, which doesn't help the dehydration, but he perseveres. He knows he has to survive. And finally, he drifts so far. Remember, he was going from England to get supplies from somewhere. He drifts so far that a Brazilian fishing vessel ends up bumping into him one day and rescuing him. And obviously, he, like, had been trying to keep track of how long he was at sea using the day and night cycle and keeping track of it, but he really had no idea how long he had been out there. After a while, everything just starts to blend together. So when he realizes it's been 133 days, he realizes again that, like, wow, that's probably got to be one of the longest times that anyone has survived adrift at sea. And since then, there has been a guy who was drifting around the Gulf of Mexico for like over a year, but for a very long time, this was one of the longest, if not the longest time someone managed to survive adrift. And all of this had been done on a makeshift raft. It's not like he was really prepared for this. There's nothing you can do to really prepare prepare for this, I guess. But it's not like he had a lifeboat with all these supplies to get him started and a really safe place to shelter. No, from day one, this guy just had to struggle and do everything and build it himself. But he was so resourceful that you couldn't hold him down, man. Like, he managed to survive 133 days drifting at sea. And so the story of this starts going crazy, and it was a pretty inspiring story because, you know, oh, the Germans can't take us down. We'll survive 133 days at sea. And he ends up going back to England and getting the British Empire Medal for his survival, which is a pretty big deal. Everyone was very impressed by his story. And after that, he went back to China for a bit before moving to Hong Kong, which was a protectorate of the British Empire for a little bit after World War II, and lived out the rest of his life relatively normally. Just a guy who survived an absolutely insane circumstance. You know, when people would like come up to him and say, man, it's just so difficult trying to get through the work week, he would be like, hey, I'm not trying to one-up you here, but I survived 133 days on the ocean by eating birds and catching fish with nails, so I really don't want to hear it. This is Slavomir, who was a Polish soldier during World War II who found himself caught in the middle of a Poland divided between Germany and the Soviet Union. And so he was on the Soviet Union side, and the rest of the Polish army was on the other side of the border. And this was a makeshift border because they had just been conquered, so he was trying to get back to the rest of the Polish army. And as he's making his way across the border, unfortunately, he was captured by Soviet troops, and he gets sent to trial. And basically every Polish soldier that didn't immediately give up and say, all right, you're our new leader, we'll do whatever you want, ended up being sentenced to go to a gulag for hard labor for espionage. The way the Russians viewed it is like, if you weren't willing to submit, now we're just going to send you away and get as much forced labor out of you until you die, or whatever, 25 years from now, I guess you can come back out. And so they ship all these people off to these gulags, which are horrible conditions. It's freezing, it's forced labor. They're basically starving you. They give you just enough to survive. And so all of the prisoners start talking about how they've got to find a way out of here. There's no way that they're going to be able to survive this long term. So they need to figure out a way out of here. And they kind of realized that there was this one spot over by the fence where the guards wouldn't really pay attention and they couldn't see it very well. And so him and 6 prisoners decide that they're going to dig a tunnel. And they start digging a tunnel very slowly underneath this barbed wire fence, and they don't want to make it too obvious. They don't want to get caught, but they also don't want to take so long that they get discovered. So they start digging this tunnel, and finally they get to the other side and they realize, all right, now we have this tunnel, but how are we going to survive out in Siberia trying to get to anywhere that's going to be friendly to us? And on top of it, they don't have a vehicle. And the thing about Siberia is it's just vast nothingness. No offense if you're from Siberia, I'm sure it's pretty or whatever, but for the most part, if you try to escape from a prison camp in Siberia, you run into the problem of there's really nowhere to escape to that isn't thousands of miles away. But the desperation of the gulag makes them be like, well, I would rather take my chances going thousands of miles on foot in the middle of hostile territory than stay here another day. Because if you think about it, they're either going to catch you, and chances are you're not going to make it much longer after that, right? Or you're going to stay here and literally be worked to death. So either way, it's not going to end very well. So him and these 6 prisoners end up embarking on this journey on foot across the frozen wilderness of Siberia, just vibing, doing their thing, walking their way across. And so they spend the next few weeks on foot kind of traversing across Russia, which is hostile territory, so they have to be stealthy about it. They can't really get help from local villagers because they're just going to turn them in. They kind of have to live like almost like a special operations soldier behind enemy lines while they're making this escape. And they walk from Siberia all the way across Russia, all the way across Mongolia, and they get to the Gobi Desert. And they have to cross the Gobi Desert. And there's still 6 of them at this point. Everyone's made it. But now people are starting to not look too great. You know, the food situation hasn't been fantastic. Things aren't the best it could possibly be. And so they start crossing the Gobi Desert, also on foot, which is one of the most inhospitable deserts on the planet. I grew up in the desert, and so I did a little bit of Googling for this video to be like, oh, okay, crossing the Gobi Desert, like, what would that be like? I don't know. I just assumed most deserts were the same. This desert like super freezes at night and can get as low as -40, which does not happen in the desert that I live in. So, yeah, that's a little bit different. And along the way of them like trying to get across this desert, 2 of them die. So there's only 4 left in this group that originally escaped the camp, and even those 2 people that sadly passed away had gone thousands of miles on foot to try to escape what they were going through. So it's not like Not like any of them hadn't been through a ton. It's just unfortunately when you're going like 4,000 miles on feet across conditions that get as low as -40 degrees, you're already not eating incredibly well. You've already escaped a forced labor camp. Like, it's not like when they escaped in the first place, they had all this extra fat on them. No, they were in a forced labor camp. Things were already not looking great, and they still managed to walk thousands of miles on feet. And so this group is left. 2 of them have now sadly passed away, but they end up getting into Tibet by crossing the Gobi Desert. And once they're in Tibet, they're like, look, our best bet is probably to just go to India because it's still a protectorate of the British at this point. If not, it's an allied country, so they're not going to get murdered if they go there and start asking for help. And they had been helped by the Mongolians along the way. Some Russians had helped them too. But for the most part, they had been trying to keep a low key, but if they could get to India, it's not like the Russians were going to come invade India to try to get them. So they decide that they're going to get there. And I'm sure at this point they're like, look, it can't be that much worse. We've already walked thousands of miles. We've already been through the Gobi Desert. Things have been horrible. 2 of us have passed away. But unfortunately, they bumped into this little thing that they had to cross called the Himalayas, which is the largest mountain range in the world. So their luck kind of could not keep getting worse. And so they really have no other option. So they start crossing the Himalayas. And it's insanely treacherous terrain. And at this point, their bodies are near giving up anyways because they've walked across Siberia, they crossed the Gobi Desert, and the conditions are just nuts. Like, imagine, you walk through the desert, it's hot during the day, -40 at night, you finally think you're going to get some reprieve. Oh, you're just in one of the coldest places on the planet instead. And unfortunately, another 2 members end up passing away on their way through the Himalayas. But the other 3 remaining members know that they can't give up now. They've already come this far. So many members of their party have passed away along this journey. Like, if they give up, it's all going to be for nothing. So they keep trudging on. And finally, they get through to the other side of the Himalayan mountains, and they end up bumping into this Gurkha patrol. And if you don't know what a Gurkha is, it's a division of the military, which is basically like a combination of the Nepali and British army. They fuse together. If you serve in the Gurkha units, you can get British citizenship if you're from Nepal. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. But either way, allied soldiers. So a good thing to bump into if you're escaping a Siberian prison camp. And of course, the Gurkhas are blown away that they say they escaped from a camp in Siberia because they realize that they're very far away from Siberia as well. So they end up taking them to a hospital in Calcutta where they recovered before going back home. And what's nuts is there's actually a journal entry from a guy who was like working in the Gurkha patrols at the time. And he talks about how he stumbled upon 3 emaciated men who claim to have escaped from Siberia, which is such an insane thing to think about. Like, you're stumbling around. That's like the equivalent of me stumbling around in Las Vegas and some guy running up to me and being like, help, I just escaped a prison camp in North Korea. I'd be like, what? You did what? You did what? Where? Here? You just got here from there? I don't know. I think people will survive anything if you put them in a situation where they have to survive it. But they really went a long way to get to a friendly country. It just goes to show how, like, isolated they really were up in Siberia. I mean, think about it. That's the middle of nowhere. The fact that they had to walk thousands of miles before they crossed the Gobi Desert and then the Himalayas goes to show how nuts this escape really was. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. I'm not a historian. I just think these stories are interesting. And I know you guys said in the last one that I should do them every now and then, so I felt like making one today. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to press the like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below, and of course subscribe if you're new. Turn on those notifications. You can listen to me on Spotify if you want. I'll put a link down below, and I'll also throw a link to the intro song down there too. Feel free to check it out, no pressure. And yeah, on that note, guys, that'll do it. Don't get anyone pregnant. If you do, make sure they're hot, and hopefully I'll see you guys all next time with another video. I'm out. Peace.